safety, members of their delegations, and all friends of the campaign. You can also give them a warm South African welcome. And you may also take your seats. As I mentioned earlier, the bathrooms are outside the exit, to your right in the foyer. On your table are what we call table talkers, which you can use to charge your phones and laptops. And Wi-Fi, the code, there's no password needed, but the username is Marriott Bonvoy for the hotel. Also, just before I officially begin the program of the day, may I implore on the goodwill of the Honourable Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga to join me on stage, along with the UN Special Envoy, Todt, to join me on stage, along with the Chief Executive of JCDecaux, Martin Sabach, to join me on stage, please. Thank you very much. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us at this breakfast briefing and dialogue where we're going to talk about a truly important issue for South Africa, for Africa and the world, road safety, in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As we begin, may I introduce myself? I am Lerato Mbele, a talk show host here in South Africa. And I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the Honourable Minister of Transport, Sindisiwe Chikunga, our host for this morning's briefing. We're also joined by our esteemed guest, the UN Special Envoy on Road Safety, Todt. And allow me to say to you, bienvenue, monsieur, en notre beau pays. Aujourd'hui, pour nous, c'est un grand plaisir de vous accueillir ici. Et on vous remercie pour votre temps. Yeah, because you all thought South African girls only speak isiZulu. I'd also like to acknowledge the Chief Executive of JCDecaux, a leading above-the-line advertiser worldwide who are giving us the infrastructure for this campaign the world over. Martin Sabach, thank you for your time. I'd like to acknowledge chief executives of various road and traffic management agencies, SANRAL, represented here today, the Road Accident Fund, the Road Traffic Management Infringement Agency, the Road Traffic Management Corporation, the cross-border transport agencies. In a short while, we'll be hearing from all their chief executives in what will be an industry C-suite discussion. And so we thank you for your time. We also have industry executives who will engage us as stakeholders, very important stakeholders. They are chief executives and managing directors of insurers and vehicle manufacturers who are also with us here today. They're an important part of the partnership that helps to amplify road safety and to create the ecosystem for it too. And so we thank you for your time. I'd like to acknowledge all stakeholders, fellow journalists and members of the media who are with us here today. I believe all of us in this room are friends of an important campaign, road safety. In a world where too many people are losing their lives to negligence, recklessness, and immense pressures of driving on some of South Africa's roads. I'd like to just quote a few statistics this morning Firstly, the Road Traffic Management Corporation says the vehicle population in South Africa stands at about 12.5 million. I think this is a truly encouraging figure because it speaks to the aspirations of South Africa. It speaks to the fact that many people who previously did not have access currently have access, and owning a vehicle is a sign of social mobility. And so that density and the growth of that density is something to be applauded. However, the Automobile Association says the average fatalities or number of fatalities on South African roads is at about 12,000 per year. The number varies depending on what's happening seasonally and how successful campaigns have been in each annum. But 12,000 deaths in a year on South African roads is one death too many. It's almost 10% or more than 1% of the vehicle ownership. Figures also show that those fatalities, 43%, are pedestrian deaths. And so whilst it is easy for us to say the state of the roads is up for discussion or the quality of driving is up for discussion, almost half of the fatalities are attributed to pedestrians, which now speaks to the behavior of individuals, walking or driving. And as South Africans, we all know what we're talking about. All too often I've seen people using the highway as a crossover bridge instead of using an actual footbridge. So there is a culture of recklessness in the country. There's also a culture of impunity. There's a culture of can do, care less. And these are very, very disturbing trends. For a society that's predicated on Ubuntu and principles of community unity, mutual respect, there's something about that that's not filtering into our behavior on the roads as drivers and as pedestrians. And so today, we are having a holistic conversation around road safety, but we're also making a clarion call to all of you here and to audiences broader than this room on radio and on television to say all hands on deck. The solution requires everybody's commitment in the vehicle, walking on the road, as a policymaker, as a regulator, within the road traffic agency industry, within society as a whole. We can only have a solution if everybody is committed to the solution. And so our conversation today is really going to point out the problems, but try to identify the solutions. And we'd like to ask you to engage with us at various intervals and share with us your knowledge, your expertise, so that we start talking solutions and opportunities beyond just the campaign. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, the warmest welcome to this breakfast dialogue. We hope to hear from you, and we hope in the very end we walk away with ideas on how to fix a problem. It's not just a South African problem. We will hear that it is a global problem, but we'd like South Africans to be safe on our roads, all of them. And so without further ado, may I defer this podium and this microphone to the Honourable Minister of Transport, Sindisiwe Chikunga, to set the tone with her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me acknowledge the presence of our United Nations Special Envoy on Road Safety, His Excellency, Mr. Todt, the CEO of JC, the whatever, Mr. Martin Sabot. Yes, also acknowledge the presence of chairpersons of boards of our state-owned companies, CEOs of state-owned companies and the private-owned companies in South Africa. Excellencies. Oh, okay. Thank you. Excellencies, High Commissioners and Ambassadors, please allow me to observe protocols. And thank you again, sir, for being here in South Africa. Indeed, it is a great honor for us in South Africa to host the United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety, Mr. Todt, during this month of May. Of course, in South Africa, this year marks 30 years of democracy, and safer roads and public transport have featured prominently in the developmental trajectory of our administration. Road-related crashes resulting in serious injuries and fatalities were only brought to the global agenda in 2009, as you will know, when over 100 ministers of transport came together and took a United Nations resolutions to declare 2011-2020 a decade of action for road safety. The primary aim of the first decade of action for road safety was to reduce and stabilize, first to stabilize and then reduce road crashes and fatalities. The main objective was to save 5 million lives and up to 50 million serious injuries by halving road accidents by 50% at the end of the decade for road safety, which was 2020. In August 2020, the UN General Assembly issued a new resolution which proclaimed the period 2021-2030 as the second decade of action for road safety. The second decade of action also aims to reduce road traffic deaths and injuries by at least 50% by 2030. According to scientific empirical evidence, it is recorded that more than 85% of road traffic injuries and deaths occur in low and middle income countries and impose huge economic costs in these countries. Research also shows that Africa is the least motorized continent, possessing 2% of the global vehicle population, but it contributes 16% of the recorded global road fatalities. To address this gap at SADC level, we developed the SADC protocol, which is an instrument adopted and used by the SADC member states, which seeks to establish transport, communications, and meteorology systems that provide efficient, cost-effective, and fully integrated infrastructure and operations to promote economic and social development while being environmentally and economically sustainable. Coming to South Africa, as a nation, we first experienced, as I think many of us will be aware, we first experienced our major road crash over a century ago. That is in 1903 in Maitland, in the then Cape of Good Hope, currently known as the Western Cape Province. Statistics shows that between 1903 and 2014, we recorded 459,000 and 9,500 road crashes, which resulted in 545,601 road deaths. Since the dawn of democracy, we have seen an escalation in numbers of road traffic casualties, and this is attributed to the increase of vehicle population as more people were now eligible to access bank loans and able to purchase vehicles. From 1994-1995, the vehicle population increased by 1 million, from 5.5 million to 6.5 million. Calculating from a period between 1994 to 2022, we moved from 5.5 million to almost 13 million vehicles, that is to 12.96 million. Such an increase has presented a plethora of road safety related challenges from human factors, environmental factors, engineering and technical factors, law enforcement, as well as education and awareness factors. Due to the increased statistics on road crashes, fatalities, and serious injuries, South Africa was amongst the first countries to be a signatory to the 2011-2020 Decade of Action for Road Safety in an effort to change the status quo. Distinguished guests, guided by the National Road Traffic Act of 1996, the Millennium Development Goals, and the UN Decade of Action for Road Safety, we have developed a multifaceted approach to regulate and ultimately reduce the fatalities on our roads. We developed a national action plan for the Decade of Action for Road Safety in line with the 6 UN Decade of Action pillars as well as of the safe system approach, which include Pillar 1, which is road safety management, Pillar 2, safer road and mobility, Pillar 3, safe vehicles, Pillar 4, safer road users, Pillar 5, post-crash responses. In South Africa, we added Pillar 6, taking into account our statistics and what it tells us and what it shows. And the Pillar 6 then was youth and is youth and mobility. At a national level, as the Department of Transport, we convened a series of national road safety policy consultative workshops and road safety summits to foster open and critical dialogue between government, private sector, industry, civil society, and academia. And I must indicate that we have actually been supported by all these institutions. We work together on this one subject with whether the private sector or the academia in trying to deal with the issues. So yes, indeed, it is a collaborative approach when it comes to this. And really, I want to thank the private sector in South Africa for supporting this important responsibility. We introduced legislative amendments to enhance preventive measures. For instance, we introduced blood alcohol content limits, speed limits, especially in urban areas and around schools. We also established mandatory seatbelt regulations and child restraint use. Key to this was the admission of the Road Traffic Management Corporation as a member of the UN Road Safety Collaboration as the lead agents on road safety, which gave rise to South Africa's participation on the Global Road Safety Plan. We examined a range of sentencing options for traffic violations, including license suspensions under the ARTO demerit point system, and for specific grades of offenses, community service sentences, and or mandatory license testing. Of course, that is the responsibility of the Road Traffic Infringement Agency, which is our state-owned company, when it comes to the implementation of ARTO demerit point system, which we have not rolled out as yet, but ready to do it this year. We approved the 2016-2030 National Road Safety Strategy with intermediate and long-term actions to ensure vehicle fitness, driver safety, pedestrian safety, community participation in issues of road safety. We developed an action plan for the achievement of the goals through the Road Traffic Management Corporation as a lead agency on road safety matters and working together with all road-based transport entities, provinces and local municipalities, that is at government level. We put in place advanced technical norms and standards for road infrastructure and vehicles. To have savvy and smart drivers, better vehicles and road-safe pedestrians, we introduced multilingual touchscreen, audiovisual computerized learner driver's license test system with a view to minimize corruption at the first stage of the licensing process and making the system more accessible because of the challenges that we faced at our DLTCs, particularly associated with corruption. We upgraded our driver learner testing centers and we formalized and regulated the driving school sector by introducing tight accreditation criteria for owners and managers, clearly defined customer service standards, and properly graded skills requirement for instructors with respect to the different categories of vehicles. We tightened the existing practical, theoretical, and medical tests for the renewal of the professional driver's permit. We further reviewed the operation of the entire vehicle testing system, both in terms of its ownership structure and in terms of the effectiveness of current manual regulatory procedures and monitoring systems. We ensure that provinces implement the new pedestrian facility guidelines and the new South Africa road safety and speed limits manuals. We also supported the commitment by provinces to carry out planned, continuous, multidisciplinary upgrades of identified urban and rural hazardous locations with community participation via democratically structured road safety forums. We also expanded the rural road upgrade maintenance programs nationwide, supported by systematic funding of image and construction SMMEs, while at the same time integrating safety training into the process of improving road quality and visibility. We introduced the 365 Days Road Safety Program, which emphasizes the fact that road safety is an everyday commitment and a shared responsibility. Through the RTMC, we have also introduced NQF Level 6, 21st Century National Traffic Officer. Just the other day, we witnessed the pass-out, in fact yesterday, we witnessed the pass-out parade of 409 young men and women joining the National Traffic Management Fraternity to further improve the safety of lives on our roads. And this gives us at least now a total of 600 of our National Traffic Officers. We are currently, and we already have taken another group so that we continue to produce these traffic officers who are better trained. We are currently in the process to have traffic management services as an essential service available 24 hours, 7 days a week. And indeed, we're getting some problems here with the unions, but we think that we've got to go ahead and ensure that this is happening. We must commend the RTMC, supported by the department and all other 4 road-based entities, in how they've embraced the role of lead agency and implemented its responsibility of determining norms and standards for road safety traffic personnel, enhancing road safety research development, implementing national road safety campaigns, and increasing private sector and civil society participation. The post-crash response has also enabled us to strengthen law enforcement tools and in the process saved government from corruption and fraud. As we all know, the Road Accident Fund is mandated to identify the wrongdoers through a fault-based system to compensate road accident victims. This has also assisted in developing partnerships that ensure effective and efficient utilization of resources. We have transformed the post-care agency in the form of Road Accident Fund, confirmed the central role of South African National Road Agency Limited in building safer roads. Together with the leadership of provincial and local government, we have launched a comprehensive plan to address potholes across all spheres of government. SANRAL is also leading the monitoring and implementation of this pothole repair program called Vala Zonke, which forms this national campaign. I hasten to explain that indeed the problem of potholes is here with us in South Africa. But when you relate it to accidents, it's not many accidents that happen on those bad roads in South Africa. The top 20 hazardous roads in South Africa are our national roads. It is the N1, it is the N3, it is the R61, it is the Moloto roads, and if you look at those roads, all of them are in good state of life. In fact, they are the best roads that we have in South Africa, probably in the continent, and they compare well with the roads that we have at world level. But that is where we have our accidents happening, because people just decide to drive anyhow. Our innovative freeway management system allows for real-time monitoring and management of the road network. We use intelligent transport system technologies, and we relay information on the flow of traffic, which is then displayed on variable message signs and sent to various radio stations for broadcast to the public and online platforms. And that is when we are informed as we drive that there is traffic on that particular road. The Road Traffic Infringement Agency, which is committed to safer behavior, has also been established, and I've indicated that it is responsible for the implementation and rollout of ARTO. Finally, we must point to the active role of the Cross-Border Road Transport Agency in improving the flow of freight and commuter traffic in SADC. At our land borders, the CBRTA regulates the movement of passengers and goods across the borders with a great responsibility of ensuring that transportation takes place in a safe manner along the corridors. The CBRTA is championing across a live road safety campaign meant to promote reliable and safe transportation of passengers and goods across the borders. The work of these 5 agencies, road-based agencies, have continued and has continued to evolve with deepened approaches to road safety, and it is through their joint efforts and partnerships that we are starting to see some slight results. It should be emphasized that as government, we have been doing our part by implementing the necessary improvements that must augment our efforts to save lives and have collectively worked towards ensuring that citizens also take place. It is possible in South Africa to know the accident that happens in the far-flung areas of South Africa because of the information gathering tools that we use. Recently, we conducted a detailed analysis of road crash patterns in our country over the past 5 years. The analysis has shown that although we are making steady progress in reducing fatalities, however, from a very high baseline, we need to fast-track progress by intelligently deploying our law enforcement, conducting safety education campaigns at identified hotspots, and at times where crashes are likely to happen. In South Africa, it is easy to know where road crashes or where accidents can happen. You just see the houses on the other side of the road and a tavern on the other side of the road, then you know that is a hotspot for road accidents. It's as easy as all that. We may not be where we want to be, but we are no longer where we were before the UN Decade of Action for Road Safety state when it started. Our National Road Safety Strategy is showing some little progress. The migration of rail-friendly cargo also is one other way of ensuring that we reduce trucks on our roads, and we're busy ensuring that it gets implemented. The administration has therefore sought to urgently reverse this situation by bringing about the necessary policy reforms that will see us reverse these challenges and getting that cargo that is rail-friendly back to rail. Ladies and gentlemen, our statistics indicated that up to 87% of road fatalities in South Africa can be attributed to road user behavior. Research has shown that our employed youth are the ones who carry the heaviest burden of road crashes, injuries, and fatalities in our country. Most of whom come from tertiary institutions. Statistics also shows that the pedestrian fatalities are a higher segment of victims in the country, and young economically active people between the ages of 25 and 39 constitute the majority of those who die on the roads. As a country, we acknowledge that road user behavior is central to making our roads safer, and it is for that reason that we wholeheartedly embrace this dialogue and the dialogue theme, which is about changing the behavior of road users. In South Africa, the right to physical and mental safety of each of our people is enshrined in the Constitution. The National Development Plan also makes provision for the reduction of trauma and injuries by 50% in the year 2030. We will indeed draw from the collective wise counsel and great ideas of those who are gathered here to guide us in harnessing efforts towards changing the behavior of users on our roads. We also welcome the critical partnerships we have with the private sector in addressing this catastrophic loss of lives on our roads. Sometimes they criticize us, but we always listen to their criticisms because sometimes they sharpen our minds. I'm proud of the role that the private sector, non-governmental organizations, faith-based organizations, road safety ambassadors and activists have played to support the initiatives of government to educate the public and awareness about road safety. It's easy for us to access any of their institutions and places. If we say we want to come to your garage and run an awareness campaign, we've never been not afforded the opportunity. And we thank you for that. You've never made us to pay for that. You always allow us to come and run those awareness campaigns. We really want to thank our private sector in South Africa. I also wish to thank you, Your Excellency, the UN Secretary's General Special Envoy for Road Safety, Mr. Todt, for his steadfast activism for road safety. It is indeed in redoubling our efforts and humankind that we can succeed in arresting the spectre of unwanted, unnatural deaths and fatalities on our roads. Do continue to leave your own footprints and custodians of road safety around the world. We thank you again, sir, for being here. We thank you for being here. This topic that we're discussing here, it's not just about a story. It's a real story of people losing lives unnecessarily out of things that can be prevented. I thank you very much.
And we thank you, Minister, for what is a candid and comprehensive overview of the carnage on our roads and also its social impact. You know, when you paint a picture of a settlement on one side of the road, a tavern on the other side of the road, and that being a hotspot, it becomes a uniquely South African story to tell. And that really has a bearing on our conscience as a whole. So thank you for that submission. Now it is the turn of the UN Special Envoy, Todt, to address us. He really needs no introduction, having been the president of the International Federation of Automobiles, himself a rally driver, and associated with Scandera and that supercar Ferrari. He is not just a UN envoy, he is a champion in the world, and he is here to champion an important cause, which is we can enjoy these amazing cars and we can be conscientious and responsible too. And so, sir, I defer to you.
Good morning. Honorable Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga, Makosini CB, CEO of Road Traffic Police, ladies, gentlemen, dear friends. It's my pleasure to be here, and let me thank Minister Chikunga for her inspirational speech and presentation. And I've had the opportunity of spending quite a lot of time since I arrived on Monday in South Africa. And I was touched and impressed with the commitment of the Minister and all her team about addressing road safety in South Africa. But maybe before speaking specifically about South Africa and some actions I've been participating since my arrival, let me kind of frame what is road and safety around the world. Every year, 1.2 million people die on the roads. You have about 40 to 50 million people who are injured with full disability. It's number one cause of death for youth between 5 to 29 years old age. And it's also such a burden for the family, for the victims, and for the society, because it's about 3 to 10% of the GDP of the country. Globally, the road crashes is a cost of about $2 trillion for the society every year. And contrary to other pandemics, we have the prescriptions around education, law enforcement, quality of vehicles, quality of road infrastructures, and quality of post-crash care. As the Minister mentioned, road safety is part of SDG 3.6, which is to halve the number of victims by 2030, 11.2, which is to give access to public transportation to any citizen. Simple things will divide by 2 and will allow to achieve the SDG, like buckling the safety belt, respecting the speed, wearing a proper helmet, drug and drink driving, and text driving. So we know what to do. Now going more specifically to the continent of Africa. Africa is the most vulnerable part of the world on road and safety. And going now to South Africa, as the Minister explained, every year for about 60 million population, you have about 14,000 people who die on the road. To give you an example, for 100,000 population in Africa, you have about 25 people who lose their life, contrarily to 6 for 100,000 in Europe. So it's about 4 times more in Africa. Incidentally, in Europe, it was about 25 for 100,000 40 years ago, until governments, private sector decided that this carnage on the roads had to stop. And one of the reasons of my visit here was to launch a global campaign road safety information campaign, which is a UN JCDecaux campaign, which will appear in 1,000 cities, 80 countries, with 14 global celebrities and national celebrities. Why this campaign? Because we need to put higher on the agenda what I call a silent pandemic.
So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us at this breakfast briefing and dialogue where we're going to talk about a truly important issue for South Africa, for Africa and the world, road safety, in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As we begin, may I introduce myself? I am Lerato Mbele, a talk show host here in South Africa, and I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the Honourable Minister of Transport, Sindisiwe Chikunga, our host for this morning's briefing. We're also joined by our esteemed guest, the UN Special Envoy on Road Safety, Jean Todt. And allow me to say to you, bienvenue, monsieur, à notre beau pays. Aujourd'hui, pour nous, c'est un grand plaisir de vous accueillir ici et on vous remercie pour votre temps. Yeah, because you all thought South African girls only speak isiZulu. I'd also like to acknowledge the Chief Executive of JCDecaux, a leading above-the-line advertiser worldwide who are giving us the infrastructure for this campaign the world over. Martin Sabach, thank you for your time. I'd like to acknowledge chief executives of various road and traffic management agencies, SANRAL, represented here today, the Road Accident Fund, the Road Traffic Management Infringement Agency, the Road Traffic Management Corporation, the cross-border transport agencies. In a short while, we'll be hearing from all their chief executives in what will be an industry C-suite discussion, and so we thank you for your time. We also have industry executives who will engage us as stakeholders, very important stakeholders. They are chief executives and managing directors of insurers and vehicle manufacturers who are also with us here today. They're an important part of the partnership that helps to amplify road safety and to create the ecosystem for it too. And so we thank you for your time. I'd like to acknowledge all stakeholders, fellow journalists and members of the media who are with us here today. I believe all of us in this room are friends of an important campaign, road safety. In a world where too many people are losing their lives to negligence, recklessness, and immense pressures of driving on some of South Africa's roads. I'd like to just quote a few statistics this morning. Firstly, the Road Traffic Management Corporation says the vehicle population in South Africa stands at about 12.5 million. I think this is a truly encouraging figure because it speaks to the aspirations of South Africa. It speaks to the fact that many people who previously did not have access currently have access, and owning a vehicle is a sign of social mobility. And so that density and the growth of that density is something to be applauded. However, the Automobile Association says the average fatalities or number of fatalities on South African roads.
Speech and presentation about her story. On the 17th of July, 2022, she could not reach her son on the phone. And in the evening, she heard that she lost her son, the wife, and the 4 kids. So, I mean, we have one tragic example of a leader, I mean, who knows what she's talking about. And all about you, all you in this room, I'm sure you have relatives, you have friends, you have family who have been dying on the road. So today is a kind of call to help, to support, and to really engage on reducing victims on the road in South Africa. If you are able to do it in South Africa, we will be able to do that, to replicate that in all Africa and, of course, in Asian countries, in Latin America, because this burden, unfortunately, is touching every citizens around the world. I thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur Todt. An impassioned speech and a picture of the trends worldwide across Africa, and South Africa being the most advanced economy in Africa. It's almost as if we can get it right in South Africa with the resources, then the rest of the continent can do too, is what I've heard you say. I'd now like to yield the floor to the Chief Executive of the outdoor advertising company, JC Decaux. I believe the Minister said, JC, we can finish the rest of the French. JC Decaux, the CEO, is Martin Sabach, who is responsible for Africa and the Middle East. And the company itself has an extensive footprint across this region, and this office is responsible for 25 markets. So the campaign itself, when we see these beautiful billboards, many of them belong to JC Decaux, and we'd like all South Africans, all Africans, to get the message of why it is important to be conscientious about road safety. And so we thank you for your role, and we defer to you, Martin Sabach.
Good morning. Dear Minister of Transport, dear UN Secretary General's Special Envoy, dear CEOs, dear government colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me first to thank the Minister of Transport for organizing this very important press conference. At JC Decaux, we're very privileged to partner with the United Nations and Mr. Jean Todt to launch this international road safety campaign. The enlightening and encouraging interactions we've had with many public and private stakeholders since we arrived on Monday shown how relevant this conversation and this campaign is in South Africa and more globally in Africa. As the #1 outdoor advertising and street furniture company worldwide, we are a major player in urban mobility and have public-private partnership and service delivery at the core of our DNA and very close to our heart. JC Decaux has been operating in Africa for almost 20 years, covering 19 African countries, and we're very proud of the various community-oriented initiatives from our road traffic management system with the Lagos State government to the public bus shelter program in Abidjan, or closer to here, the waste collection program that we run in the world-class African city of Johannesburg. We're fully aware of our responsibility as a corporate and the role we can play to ensure a safe and pleasant public space for us all. This campaign underlines how our sustainable media can use its power and mass reach to raise awareness of the safety rules that must be respected by all at all times. As it's been widely said by Excellency the Minister and Mr. Jean Todt, education is paramount, and we're happy to play a role there. When implemented well, we also believe that working together with transport planning departments in the various cities in South Africa, JC Decaux out-of-home platforms can also go beyond raising awareness and be an agent for good. We truly believe that strong public-private partnership could further improve road safety. And further to your comments, Your Excellency, we, private sector, are very happy to be committed and to be engaged further in this conversation. You have our commitment there. It is therefore an honor to launch this campaign today in South Africa. Since last week, the campaign has been displayed across the country on many different advertising panels. You can see some of them here, reaching out to a very large and diverse South African audience. Within the next 2 years, it will be further displayed across 80 countries in the world and more than 1,000 cities on thousands of JC Decaux advertising panels translated into 30 languages. On behalf of JC Decaux's board, let me thank the United Nations Secretary General Special Envoy for Road Safety, Mr. Todt, and all the international and South African ambassadors who have committed to promoting with us these safety statements. Our statement as JC Decaux is to support actively this campaign, and we're convinced that all our JC Decaux employees and partners will join us in this effort to raise awareness on this major cause that we've been supported together with you since 2017. This commitment is part of JC Deco's long-standing corporate social responsibility policy, which strives to encourage responsible communications to improve citizens' everyday life across the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for that, Martin Sabach. Right now, we're going to look at this advert that has been broadcast and published across the country and look at some of the familiar faces who are pledging to do the right thing for road safety. Yeah, and I can see there's a confusion in the room. Do we clap? Do we not clap? We applaud the creativity, the messaging, but these are children. And this is one of the campaigns embedded in the road safety campaign. It's the one sponsored by JC Deco, which is Save Kids' Lives. And as you can see, this kind of issue, it transcends geography. It's filmed partly in France, partly in Cape Town. It transcends race. It transcends class. It transcends age. And each day our children go to school. We don't know whether tomorrow is promised to them. And so these are really issues to think about. At this juncture, may I say thank you to our esteemed panel for joining us. And you may take your seats with the broader audience and leave the stage as we prepare for the CEO panel. But as we're doing so as well, so thank you very much to Mr. Sabach, Minister Chikunga, UN Envoy Todt, Thank you for your time. Thank you. At this juncture, as we just clear the stage to just put up more seating for our panel discussion with the CEOs, you'll notice that the teams from the RTMC have been handing out mini billboards. What we'd like for you to do is to take a billboard and make a pledge for yourself. What do you as an individual pledge to do for road safety? We see Yosondo on that billboard saying he pledges to use a helmet. Quite often we've seen Naomi Campbell. She's part of the campaign. There she is, I drive slow. Didier Drogba is also part of the campaign. So if we were to put your message on a JC Decaux billboard, what would your individual message be? And so we're going to use the next 2 minutes as each individual writes their pledge. And then, just by auction, by latitude, the power I have in me right now, I'm just going to point and point and point. And then people will read their message to us. Is that okay? Thank you. How are we doing with the pledges? Are we almost there? Have you had to think about your pledge? Okay, so we'll start with table number 1. I'll ask the lady in blue to stand up and tell us your pledge. Keep it simple. It doesn't have to be an essay. Just what do you pledge? Yes, ma'am. What do you pledge?
I will not be a distracted driver.
I will not be a distracted driver. I think that's a decent pledge. I got into an accident last year because I was distracted. And then I needed to blame it on someone and I couldn't find anyone except myself. Okay, let's go to the table right next to that. Who's got a message? Yes, sir?
Road safety starts with me.
Road safety starts with me. A very personal commitment. Okay, let's keep the microphone moving. Okay, let's come to the main table. We've got the 3 principals, but Mr. Sabach says something, wants to say something. You've got a pledge. Go ahead.
Mine is pretty much the same as the previous one, which is what can I do to improve road safety?
What can I do to improve road safety? And I see you've just finished. Monsieur Todt, what is your pledge? What is your pledge?
Wake up this pandemic on the roads.
Oh, end this pandemic on the roads. It's a pandemic, he says, as bad as COVID or anything else, HIV or anything else. Okay, let's keep the microphone moving. What do you pledge at the table right there in the middle?
I will not drink and drive.
Absolutely, I will not drink and drive. Let's keep the microphone moving. The table behind you. A pledge?
I obey the speed limit.
Yes. On a good day. Okay, let's keep the microphone moving. Yes?
No, I've done it already.
What is your pledge?
I will not text and drive.
I will not text and drive. It's true. I suffer from that disease big time. Big time. And they said that Google's got like a dictaphone thing that can text for you, but doesn't seem to be working. Let's move the microphone and round this up. Yes, ma'am? The table over there with the EMS people.
Mine
yes?
is already taken. Mine is already taken, but also I don't text and drive.
Don't text and drive. A modern day problem. They tell us to go digital, and then how do we manage digital with the modern day living? Next pledge. Yes, ma'am?
I think it's a pandemic by now. I will not text and drive. I'll be vigilant.
Absolutely. I see the lady at your table also want to say something. Go ahead.
Thanks. I don't drive under the influence.
Not driving under the influence. Okay, so that's coming up twice. No drinking and driving, no texting and driving. So South Africans were saying something here. Yes, ma'am? Yes, Sisola?
I will not drive fatigued.
Oh, I will not drive when I'm tired. That's true. Especially long distances.
Obeying the rules of the road is my first safety priority as a driver.
Obeying the rules of the road. What if the speed limit says 80 and you're driving a Porsche? What must you do now? Yes, ma'am? Let's go to the next table.
You're saying ma'am to me.
Oh, sorry. You're so handsome.
Always wear your seatbelt to be safe.
Always wear your seatbelt to be safe. And also, always make sure the kids are wearing seatbelts as well in the back seat of the car. Yes, madam.
I think from the mamas and the gogos in the country, we will contribute towards advocacy on pedestrian road safety awareness.
Pedestrian road safety
Because
awareness.
we all worried about what we're going to do, but we're not worried about the little ones that don't know what they're supposed to do.
Absolutely. Let's worry about the kids. And the final comment is at the end near the sound desk. Yes, ma'am.
Being safe is cool. I'll check my WhatsApps later.
Amen. Nice one. And that's just a snapshot of what we believe our responsibilities are towards children. As we've heard, most of us are clearly texting and driving, so we should not obey the speed limit. Quite a few don't drink and drives. And then, of course, if we're serious about road safety, we don't just speak the words, we treat it as an urgent pandemic, as urgent as COVID was a pandemic, as urgent as HIV and AIDS prevention was a pandemic. It is a significant social issue in our country. Thank you so much for your engagement. We're now going into our panel discussion with 5 of our CEOs who work across agencies in this sector. And so, not by any order of importance, but I'm going to defer now and ask that the acting CEO of SANRAL, Dumsani Nkabinde, join me on stage. I'm also going to ask that the CEO of the Road Accident Fund, Collins Letswalo, joins us on stage. We would like to hear from the CEO of the Road Traffic Infringement Agency, Ntate Matsemela Moloi, to join us on stage. And then we also have Envoy, who is the Chief Executive for Cross-Border Transport Agency, CBRTA, to join us. And finally, Advocate Makhosini Msibi, the CEO of the Road Traffic Management Corporation. If all our C-suite leaders can join us on stage. And so we're going to have a brief conversation just about the work that each of them are doing within their agencies. We're then going to open for questions on the floor. What I'm going to ask is, if you've got a question, put up your hand. If I point to you, stand up, pose the simplest, most succinct question, and then we can get through as many as possible. After all, we can also use the lunch event to discuss more in depth about these issues. But this is just high level, highbrow, broad brushstrokes. Let's get a sense of what matters. Thank you very much. Oh, you need a microphone. Can we have a... You're good? You're going to share? Okay. My microphone is here, so I'm going to stand here, but only just by way of directing the conversation. So let's start with SANRAL, Dumsani Nkabinde, acting CEO. You can correct me on these figures, but a little bit of cursory research says South Africa's done really well in building roads. SANRAL, or South Africa, has about 750,000 kilometers of road, and about 80% of those are managed by SANRAL. So when we talk about the quality of roads, we're talking about the agency responsible for building, refurbishing those roads is SANRAL. The minister said only about 20 roads really account for road deaths, so we can't really say it's the quality of the roads, but she also spoke about potholes. So give us a sense of how you see it, SANRAL. Is your microphone on?
Okay. All right. Thanks, Program Director, and greetings to the excellencies and the colleagues. I think when the minister touched on the issue of our best roads being the ones that, in a sense, contribute to the most fatalities, it is true. We'll start by looking at what do we do from the infrastructure side, from SANRAL. There are a few things that we need to consider before we actually build the road. One of the most crucial part when it comes to road safety, we undertake a road safety audit on all our highways. By doing that, we actually identify areas that we call them accident hotspots, and with that, it results into I think about more than 50% of the project needs that we eventually put on the ground and implement are actually road safety initiated projects. We build a lot of interchanges. In the main, the interchanges that we build are specifically for addressing the road safety issue, whereby you separate, if you may call it, a normal four-way traffic. When it exceeds a certain number of vehicles, then you actually have to separate in order to make sure that a freeway remains free, and the other roads that or other cars that are going to different directions, they actually use the interchange. And secondly, on those interchanges, it also provides an opportunity for, as we saw in the video, for the pedestrians as well to actually use the interchange to cross safely, not to cross a live stream of traffic. And then, again, on our highways, if you can see, we have implemented a strategy, or one of the policies, to actually address the pedestrians, or we call it non-motorized transport policy. In the main, what we want to do there, what we've been implementing, is under that road safety audit to identify where there are many pedestrians walking on the road. We either provide walkways to actually move them away from the highway. We also provide the pedestrian bridge for safe crossing. And we're also actually doing something that is not, renowned worldwide, to actually provide for specific solution for South Africa, whereby there's a lot of taxis that are on our highways. So we are providing a safe stopping space for a taxi or a public transport. By doing so, we're avoiding that the taxis don't stop anywhere. And those taxi stops or public transport stopping areas are specifically identified under the road safety audit, where we say, in this particular spot, there are many people that are actually hitchhiking here. They are going to work. So henceforth, we need to actually put a proper safe stopping space. Those are some of the initiatives that, from SANRAL's point of view, we are actually implementing. The other side, I think, when Minister looked at or pointed out at some few activities that we're doing, one of them, in terms of the freeway management scheme, we are actually having this live what you call monitoring of what is happening on our roads. So I think those are the few points that I can put in terms of road safety we are doing. Thanks.
I just want to push back very briefly. So you build roads, yes, and then now as you're building roads, the infrastructure, you're creating safe zones, bridges for walkways, because you've identified a very South African problem, which is people in South Africa believe the highways, the autobahns, are not just for cars. They are for pedestrians to cross over. They are for commuter taxis.
Yes.
We see this every day. And if I refer to you anecdotally to that stretch of road between Marlborough Drive and Grayston, there is a footbridge. You're looking at the footbridge, but pedestrians still want to cross the highway and not use the footbridge.
It's actually a specific South African problem. And what we have seen, what seems to work is that we have to, as government, spend more money now in order to prevent the pedestrians from entering the highway. Thereby, you will see in some sections of the road where we've eventually either erect a physical barrier in the median, a very high wall or a very high fence in the median, whereby the pedestrian actually doesn't have an opportunity either to cross, or we just put a wall on either side of the road reserve so that you don't even are able to actually enter the highway space.
I'm going to now ask Ndadima Tsemela Moloi to join us, because the Road Traffic Infringement Agency is where we see the carrot and the stick. ARTO. Anybody want to know about ARTO? Here's the gentleman. But I'm referring to the fact that we talk carrots and sticks, in that if that pedestrian was a driver, there'd be a clear punishment system for that person, if that pedestrian was doing exactly that as a driver. But I think beyond punishment, it's how do we incentivize good behavior? In some countries, when they introduce speed limits, it's not so much that people can pay a fine, it's that you conscientize people on the importance of slowing down and observing the area around them. So South Africa's got this dual problem. We need to punish bad behavior, but we need to incentivize good behavior. How are you going about it?
A very difficult question. Honorable Minister, Mr. Todt, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Look, ours is a very difficult one because we come at the tail end of the supply chain, and you would hear some of my colleagues that are going to speak, well, except for Mr. Letswalo, actually I just come just before him. What happens on the road happens with law enforcement and so on, and those are the people who are dealing with the challenges first and head on. Well, R2 is influenced by Pillar 4 of the UN decade for safety. We're talking about safe road users. And well, of course, those of you who may know, we've been piloting R2 in Gauteng, particularly 2 municipalities, the Johannesburg Metro and Tshwane. We are at the verge now of rolling it out now that we are beyond the difficult challenge of the Concord challenge that we've had, which was resolved last year on the 12th of July. But you are asking us if we are punishing only. Well, Mr. Todt, some 2 days ago, when he first came, he said the biggest thing is we need to really make people understand if they do wrong, they'll be punished. But that's one side of it, because as you may know, Mr. Msibu will confirm, it is not possible to have traffic officers all over the place. What ARTO says is that let us look at the mentality of the person, let us look at the driver. Mr. Msibu will tell you again that about 87% of road crashes are as a result of human error. Well, there's a terrible echo.
But we've got you, it's okay.
All right. About 87% of the road crashes are as a result of human error. The minister spoke just now about young people, university graduates, and all of that. So we are trying now to reimagine our intervention into road safety. And ARTO is one of such steps that we're taking. I want to speak about, because I don't think I have too much time, I want to speak about particularly the animal in the room that everybody is worried about. One of such interventions is the point demerit system. What we are saying is some of the major infringements that result into death have got to say to a person, if I commit this, if I don't wear a seatbelt, for instance, the WHO raised some of these issues. If I don't wear a seatbelt, if I overspeed, if I speak on the phone and text and all of that, I'm likely to cause a crash, and which may result into death. Not of myself sometimes, but of somebody else, pedestrian or anybody like that. Now, we are saying if you get a fine, some people have got enough money, they pay the fine. But we're saying some of these infringements will now carry point demerit, or the law prescribes up to 15. If you incur about 15 of those, then we'll suspend your license. 15. And you go back now to what do? We can't just suspend your license and leave you like that. There's rehabilitation that we bring in. So that you go now and we need to understand what is this thing that causes delinquent behavior. What makes people excited about speed and all of that? Why do they go back to it even after they would have received some points? Because you don't just get the first point and then get your license suspended. Let me say last point before you follow up. If you suspend your license for the second time, we actually cancel it.
And you've got to go back to driving.
You've got to go back to first rehabilitation. You must give proof that you have been rehabilitated, because some of the problems may not relate to driving as such. Some of the problems are related to psychology problems and so on. And the private sector is coming closer to us to have a look at some of this, and they are funding they're willing to co-fund some of the programs that will assist us, not only to check if you can drive or not, but a person who does most terrible things are people who can drive quite well, actually. Some of the things I look at them do, if you can cut a person in front of them and you are able to apply brakes and you get them to actually hit each other and you are out of it, you must be very good at driving. But there must be something else. You know, in South Africa, when you join an on-ramp, you know how difficult it is to do? Because people literally block you. Because everybody's in a hurry. But we need to look at some of those things and start now to help these people. The last point on point demerits. If you incur some points and you start behaving well over a period of time, we remove the points one by one, which is encouraging to people to say you can actually work your way back to zero.
All right. Firstly, let's apologize. A little bit of that echo is because we are live streaming this event, and so we'd have to shut down the live stream. But I think the further away we move from the speaker, it will get better as well. I think that's also a variable. Could you just clarify in the most succinct way the demerit system? So you said it takes a while to build up the demerits, and you can also improve your behavior, which can then remove some of those. So what are the time frames we're looking at? Is it just one fine, two fines, demerit, and within a year you've got 15 points, your license is suspended? Or is it really an incremental escalation of bad behavior?
Well, each infringement, some of those that we've identified as the critical ones, will amount to a certain number of demerits. I'm making an example here. A seatbelt may be equal to three demerit points, for instance. So if you are found not to be wearing a seatbelt and it is equal to 3 demerit points, you get a fine, you still get 3 demerit points. So you've got 3. Against 15. So if you keep yourself away from doing these wrong things for a certain period of time, you lose, it's about 3 months, I think, you lose 1 and you have 2. And you behave, you lose 1, you can go back to 0.
All right. So to use that example, if not wearing a seatbelt equals 3 points, you get the fine and you get 3 demerits. So if you get caught 5 times in a year, you can really have your license suspended for not wearing a seatbelt.
You can actually have your license suspended in a week if you are delinquent.
Do that. Okay.
Yes.
But if you get fined and then you get caught for something else, but you're wearing your seatbelts and you're doing other things positively, we can start to remove those 3, it becomes 2, etc., etc. So it's really incentivizing good behavior, punishing bad behavior, and it's up to you, the driver.
Yep.
Okay, let's move along to Collins Letswalo. I know also another part of the road infrastructure services team that's often under scrutiny. And for those who are not South Africans, the Road Accident Fund, as Ndate Moloi has said, is almost the last at the end. The accident has happened, the tragedy has been recorded. How do we compensate the family? How do we rehabilitate the injured person through a medical system? And who pays for that? And that's been a very, very tricky issue. Collins Lidzon.
Good morning. We usually come at the end when everything has happened, but we are now changing that because there are a couple of things that for me are always going to be an issue, and especially coming to an issue of the culture. You'll be shocked that there's a time when South Africans actually want this money. And they believe very strongly, some amongst them believe that if you are hit by a car in a freeway, you get more money. Simply because if the injury is severe, you get more money. So people don't usually understand that. But I think we need to turn this thing on its head. And the beginning of it is this cultural aspect of things. But a couple of things that, for me, are quite upset about some of the systems we put in place. So anyone who has gone to a driver's license center wanting a driver's license, the emphasis is if you can park a car. I'm yet to see someone dying from parking, so I don't know how that works. So the emphasis is wrong. Okay?
Even the parallel parking.
Yeah,
That's tricky then.
who has ever died parallel parking? Let alone even on the steep hill, no one rolls back. A lot of times, even if you roll back, you really hardly ever kill anyone unless it's a truck or something like that. But I think there are various things that we need to put into space, and I think also this issue of someone buying a car only after getting a license, like myself. I got a license only when I started working and wanted to buy a car. In other countries, 16 years you get your driver's license and you start to drive. So in South Africa, you vote first at the age of 18 and then get a driver's license later. And there is no novice driver's category in South Africa. In Germany, to get to the Autobahn, you must be an experienced driver and all that. And I think those are things that, to me, becomes important. But I think prevention much more is better than cure, and we need to understand our own problems and bring home-brewed solutions to the problems we have. I always fight with Sandral, by the way. The fight I have with them is you engineer us into this road accidents, okay? Thinking about the pedestrian must not be something you think after you have designed. It must be part of the design. And I'll give you an example. It's not only the part where we talk about where people are trying to save money. If you were on the N1, going to Polokwane, once you pass Kranskop, they've taken those two platforms and merged them into one, and incidentally, that's where we have got the highest accident rate. You then go on the N3, where they've merged those platforms, the high accident rate happens. So very importantly is the fact that people were trying to save costs, but we engineered ourselves into a most expensive way of looking at it, where people die in the main. And this is what happens. Most of our people die head-on collisions. Okay? Head-on collisions happen during that space where someone just jumps across. There is just a yellow lane that is painted in between these two platforms, and someone is going against the traffic that is coming. Then he jumps to the third lane. And if a car loses control on this side, there's nothing that stops it. It just comes across, and you can see it all the time. So those are things that, for me, are very, very important. But corruption also plays its role in this space. Yeah. Okay, because we pay money for cold drink everywhere we go. Okay? And if we are not careful, ARTO will create our traffic law enforcers as extortionists. Because I'm likely to pay more bribe if I'm about to get to 15 points. than now, okay? The other issue is, how do you introduce administration? Because if you want it to bite, by the way, you can drive a lot in our country, won't be stopped a lot of times, by the way. I can ask you how many times were you stopped by the police. Very rarely you get stopped. But for you to, if I drive with a suspended license, who's going to know if they don't stop me? So those are some of the things that become quite important as we look at those things. But from the road accident fund side, we try to assist even on the other side of prevention. For instance, we realize that a lot of drivers will drive from DRC until they get to Durban without resting. In fact, their own companies tell them not to stop. And once they see that they have stopped, they phone, where have you stopped? So we have looked at that, and we do assist with our bus, that is driver wellness. Sometimes we realize that these people don't know that they can't see. They have got all these other diseases. It's either sugar levels or sometimes high blood pressure. They can't see and all those things. So we have intervened in that regard. We work very closely with CBRTA on that and RTMC. But we need homegrown solutions. The difficulty with it is thinking that you can take all these other things and bring in. There is no one in South Africa that does not know that you must not drink and drive. There's no one who knows that you shouldn't buckle up. There's no, all these messages we are giving them are messages they know. But it is only through the part where one knows that this can affect me, because it's always like everybody else is problem and it's not my problem.
I'd just like to ask you to just, because you've painted a very big problem of the culture in the country, if we can call it that. Yeah. A recklessness, a negligence, an impunity. You know your license is suspended, you're going to drive because the chances of a traffic officer stopping you are minimum. So we've got a lot of uniquely South African problems that we have to address. But just for the purposes of our broader audience, our UN audience as well, by the time the Road Accident Fund comes into the picture, even though you have synthesized all these social problems, how does it work? You said an interesting thing at the beginning. You said South Africans know they're going to get money. And what they are hoping for is what you alluded to, is that if I'm ever in an accident, please could it be on a highway so that I get more money? I mean, I'm sure the UN Special Envoy is sitting here thinking, what? Please, can I be on a highway to get more money? So could you just explain to us how the system works, who it compensates, how it compensates, and how you balance compensation with behavior? And I know recently we observed a medical center that you had refurbished. Why would a road accident fund be building hospitals? What for?
Look, I think when you come in at the end, you are the one that must clean up all the mess, I suspect. So what we do is that we want to meet with people when they have had this accident. And accidents are sometimes life-changing. And as we say, you could be the best behaved person on the road, but you're going to meet someone who's not behaved properly, and you get injured. So that's where we come in. Sometimes people die and they're breadwinners, and we need to come into the space. And what we do is that we have got what we call loss of support. It's in case where someone has passed. So we pay for someone's funeral, and then we say to the loved ones that have remaining, as a result of that, this is the support we did. So we try to give them that support for that lost breadwinner. But then there are instances, and the majority of them, where people get injured. And these are serious injuries, they are life-changing. So there's a loss of earnings part that you can't work in your life, so we need to intervene in that space. And then you would need medical assistance going forward during the time when you have just been injured, which is the acute phase and all that, and rehabilitation that comes after, and also in the future where you need medical intervention, we do come and intervene. And those are the things that we give South Africans. And a lot of our people don't know about this aspect of the medical part where we take care of you. They think you just receive money from us. And we are trying to make it simpler for people to come and claim. For instance, our predecessors long ago, when in the 2013, it would take 1,400 days to actually settle a claim. We are trying to do it quicker in 120 days to be able to give these people the effort. Because the difficulty here is where it is a child who has just lost a mother or has lost a father who's a breadwinner, and you do this in 1,400 days. By that time, the life changed and everything else. So that's why we want to intervene as quickly as possible. So for us, it's that part that we do. And why we rehabilitate the hospitals is that we know that if we've got clinical interventions, especially during the time when the emergency services have engaged you and you come to the space, we want to make sure that that part, the Alexander one is being the case in point, we want to make sure that that part, you get the best clinical intervention so that actually we can reduce and improve your chances of living going forward.
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
So just for your perspective, you and Special Envoy, South Africa does have a compensation scheme, I'm sure you've heard about it, if there's been an accident, so that a child who's lost a parent can quickly go back to school. If the parent is injured, they can have medical services paid for, so they can quickly go back to work and be productive. And this gentleman administers that program. But you've also heard that South Africans like to be clever. The South Africans will know what that means. And that's the unfortunate part of the story. Let's now hear from Lwazimboy, who is the CEO of the Cross-Border Transport Agency. Collins Lidzwalo says a problem he's seen recurring are heavy-duty vehicles, trucks coming all the way from the Democratic Republic of Congo through to South Africa. I'm not sure in kilometers how many that is, but that's definitely more than 3,500 kilometers. That's like 4 countries to drive through. And employers of these haulage and logistics companies will tell a driver, don't rest. So the coordination that's needed from country to country within SADC, the conversations that you need to have with haulage and logistics companies, and then we're told, you know, when you move from one Southern African country to another, the road quality is different. So SANRAL can only be responsible for South African roads. They can't be responsible for roads in Zimbabwe or Zambia or DRC. And yet these drivers, if they're South Africans and anything happens, they're coming to Colin Lidzwalo for help.
Thank you very much, and special greetings to everybody in the room, our minister and the special envoy and all the colleagues. So you're quite right. I mean, Collins has actually mentioned a very important point. So from Durban to Lubumbashi, for instance, you're looking at about 3,400 kilometers to get there. And one of the major challenges with some of the big freight companies, and I'm glad that my friends from the Road Freight Association are here, and one of the companies with especially the smaller companies who are, and it's a bottom line issue, who are interested in a quick return or making sure that they earn as much as possible out of these major contracts. They'll send the driver up, maybe one driver at a time, to drive that entire distance. And they would incentivize the non-rest, actually, and say, if you are able to come back around within a certain period of time, you will earn more money. So there is that problem, which is a massive problem, which therefore contributes to the fatigue that we see on the roads. And therefore, people lose a lot of concentration on the roads because they are chasing some incentive at the end of it. I mean, we're having this conversation with the colleagues from the Road Freight Association, so it is a real problem. And therefore, what you do notice is that there is an increase slightly on the number of truck accidents that we see, especially long haul. So that's one of the major problems. What we have also done, I think Collins forgot to mention, is that in partnership with the Road Accident Fund, we have also developed a tool, which is a road safety tool, where we interview drivers when they cross the border and determine whether they've stopped, how have they stopped. It's still a manual tool for now, but I think we are slowly migrating that into a much more technologically advanced tool. So it looks specifically on, at the issue of fatigue. So that's one of the major problems that we're faced with. Secondly, you're raising an important point, because for you to get to the DRC, for instance, you're traversing about 3 to 4 countries, and the road quality is not the same, and that is one of the major problems, but also services along the road. So over and above the issue of fatigue, because we are pressed to go through, there are no services on the roads. People sometimes, if you look at the approach to the border of Kasumbalesa. You can be on that approach for about 5 to 6 days waiting to cross the border. And there are no facilities. There are no ablution facilities. There's no water. Sometimes people cannot speak the local language. So for you to get help, it becomes a major problem. And therefore, you do have people falling sick on those stretches of road. You do have some deaths, not only caused by accident, but also by other circumstances on those stretches of road. So those are the different circumstances. However, there are efforts by our governments and to try and harmonize some of our systems, because our systems are not the same, and that's one of the major problems. So South Africa may have better systems slightly, but you do find that there are differences in terms of the other countries with some of the systems that are being deployed in other countries. There are efforts by the ministers to harmonize the systems. Last year, the Honorable Minister sitting in the room led us into a meeting of the Ministers of Transport in Tanzania, where the model laws were adopted, looking at how we can harmonize some of our systems in the region. I'm sure that's awaiting the approval of the heads of states. Yes, then the domestication process will start to look at some of the in-country contexts to see what can be done in-country to then finalize the domestication of those laws. But those are some of the challenges. But maybe in closing, let me just touch on the point that you asked earlier to one of my colleagues, the question of incentives. Because it's not only about a stick. And so there must be something else that we throw on the table to encourage road safety. So what we have been working on, for instance, as the CBRTA, is a program called OCAS, Operator Compliance Accreditation Scheme, where we're registering all truck drivers into a platform. It's easier in our case because most of the truck drivers that are crossing the road, are crossing the borders, come from within us, as our mandate is about facilitating that movement. So we are actually saying, let's look at how we can incentivize those that are behaving on the road, give them better rating. So we are moving really from what we call quantity regulating into quality regulating. So what do we put on the table? We're working with SARS very closely on this. SARS has got its own AEO program. We're bringing on board the OCAS program. So the two programs will actually provide the incentives for people to behave. They're ranked differently. And one of the incentives there is that if you are behaving on both programs, you have quick access to the border. You don't have to stop at the border. So it encourages people to get into that scheme and behave very well. We have spoken to Discover Insure. That's the last part. We have had some conversations with Discover Insure about their telematics program, because one of the problems is that as people move, there is no way we can determine whether they've stopped or they've rested along the way. So we started the conversations with Discovery. We delayed them a bit because we're still sorting out our own issues, but we are relaunching the program in July to make sure that we cover that. Yeah.
And so an insurer can help you with the telematics very briefly, but the manufacturers can too. Some
yes,
cars
absolutely.
Have those systems
yes.
in-house, and after
yes.
you've driven a certain number of kilometers, or your behavior is just a little bit awry on the road,
yeah.
the car literally tells you need to rest or else it's going to stop. So
yeah.
Are you having conversations with manufacturers?
Yes, so we started those conversations with manufacturers as well, the OEMs, to see what can be done. And the engagements we're having with the RFA, for instance, is along those lines as well, to see what can be done. And maybe just to classify, you don't have a major problem with the RFA and its members. You won't have that problem because their systems are quite organized. But as I always say to them, government is not concerned about the RFA alone, because that's just one key component of the picture. There's a big number of companies that are sitting outside the RFA that might not have these types of systems. So we are talking to them. I think the next conversation with the Honorable Minister must be about regulating the stops so that we make it compulsory for people to drive and stop after a certain period of driving. And I think once we've developed these tools on our side, we must sit down then with the Honorable Minister to see if it's possible to regulate.
So all the stakeholders on deck,
yeah.
Working with you, the Road Freight Agency, the Cross-Border Transport Agency, overseeing all of that, the National Department as well. And as the Minister said, one of the quick fixes is if we can get a lot of those goods onto rail and off the roads as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and a final submission from you, Advocate Makosini Msibi of the RTMC. Quite a few things have been said, but something that just occurred to me, because you liaise with the municipalities as well, you liaise with the other organizations on infringements. So So there's quite a few players in the ecosystem. But something was said earlier on. The driver behavior is not just drinking and driving. It's people overtaking on a white barrier line. It's people driving in an emergency lane. It's all those kinds of things that traffic officers could monitor and enforce, but they don't because there's bribery in the system. And it's a broader education around what we mean by behavior on the roads. I see that South Africans don't understand what a traffic circle is. Everybody wants to crowd into the traffic circle, not give anybody else the right of way. So there's a lot that's going on here by way of how to manage the different aspects of the problem.
Good afternoon, Minister, as well as the Special Envoy, and ladies and gentlemen. The issue that is confronting the entire populace of our South African community, as well as the world, it is an issue of the inculcation of good citizenry. In the sense that if everybody takes the responsibility to be ethical and promote patriotism, we might not even go to the second leg of beginning to enforce and ensuring that some other issues have been taken care of. Well, there is a responsibility for each and every road user to be both accountable and responsible. And within the context of the good citizenry, we're dealing with the challenges that are multifaceted. Amongst others is an issue of the role of corruption and fraud within the traffic space. You will know that we're sitting with about 13.1 motor vehicles in South Africa. We're sitting with 15.3 million drivers. The question is, how many of them are quality drivers? And how did they acquire such driver's licenses? But there is also more which my colleagues have dealt with. It is a revolution that is necessary within various spaces of our professions. Particularly, we need a revolution within the engineering services, town planning, as well as urban planning. It has to be a total change of the mindset to ensure that we begin to mitigate. If you look in terms of the issues of the pedestrians, most of the fatalities that we're confronted with in South Africa are pedestrians. So therefore it then begins to say that even planning a township or an urban planning has to change so that the streets begin to be a shared space for all of us. If you look in terms of the planning in our urban areas, little is given credence to the pavement management, allowing cyclists, allowing pedestrians, and allowing those that are health fanatic to even jog. So it's an issue that in South Africa, it should be a broader debate that we deal with. But also within the law enforcement space, we are confronted with a number of issues because there is a battle in terms of appreciating and comprehending the responsibility of any other person that has transgressed the law. It is also going to require a change of the definition of the criminal law justice. We know that there's a famous case in South Africa that dealt with the issue of dollies, and there's a phenomenon that we all know that is associated to one judge in terms of the dollies eventualis. So you have the case that we have dealt with in South Africa, the Western case, Cape case of Memphis, where 10 children were killed when a driver was crossing the railway line. Yeah. He was convicted of murder. Subsequently, the appeal court overturned the conviction to culpable homicide from a conviction of 20 years to 8 years in Memphis. But we need to celebrate because on Tuesday, South Africa has made another fundamental history within the Pongola case, where the driver of that truck has been convicted on 20 counts of murder. So it means that we then begin to take responsibility in our space that driving is equivalent to murder too. But there is also another element that we need to be dealing with, because road fatalities are not taken that serious in South Africa. The road fatalities are far than the consequences of a war. Because if you look in terms of the numbers of the people that perishes on the road annually, we're moving from 14 million per annum, we're now sitting at 11 million. And I'm saying, in each and every country, there's never been any war that has claimed the lives of 11 million. So this is a war that all of us must be conscious about and finally have to deal with it. But the last issue is, when we talk about good citizenry, it is always not then, we don't need the traffic law enforcers and police to monitor us. Our behavior and self-control and self-monitoring should then be the priority in each and every country.
All right, so my final pushback, and then right now, can I just get by show of hands, who has a question for the panelists, or can we round it off? One. It's an auction. One, going, is gone. Two. Okay, so we'll take those two questions from the floor. But one of the things you do at the Road Traffic Management Corporation, as you said, you liaise with municipalities on things like urban planning. You know, we need to think about that. You yourself are an advocate of the law, so you're very concerned about punitive measures through the legal justice system, the criminal justice system, and referring to the Pongola case in northern KwaZulu-Natal, 20 counts of murder, it's not culpable homicide. So there we go. Issues around criminal justice. This data collection, you've given us the stats, 13 million cars, 3 million deaths in aggregate. That's too many deaths on the roads. But what can be done tangibly to fix this? Whether it's vehicle inspections, it's licensing, what can be done and what can you lobby for?
Well, there is no one-size-fits-all solution, because all it starts with the human behavior and the human conduct. If you then deal with the roadworthiness of the motor vehicles, it also has an element of the human being. But what does it then mean? It therefore means that even business on its own, it has to up its game in terms of ensuring that they come to the party. The Pongola case, the owner of the vehicle was fully aware that the vehicle was never submitted to the testing center for roadworthiness. At the time when the vehicle was in Richards Bay, it was simultaneously getting a roadworthy in Northern Cape. So the role of business becomes very critical. We need to be ethical as business if we really are concerned about road safety. In terms also of skilling, the minister, we had upped the game in terms of our traffic law enforcers. They are now spending 3 years in training to ensure that we have quality traffic officers. But the question is, how long do we spend for a quality driver? So therefore we need also to change the manner how...
It's a lot of feedback. It's above my pay grade, but we heard you. So to fix it. So quite frankly, we can't just focus on the traffic enforcers, the traffic officers. We need to be training and retraining and training drivers, and corporate needs to come to the party. Thank you very much. The two questions. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. This is Themba Mdau. I'm from the Ignition TV, which is all about motoring channel. I think that is also, we also have a responsibility. Minister needs to chat, because that is a channel that will actually talk to the drivers in South Africa. So I'm not here to punt again. Okay, my question, firstly I would like to comment, or to actually make a comment on who's the gentleman from, his name is Kwalen Litswalo. Thank you very much for the comment that you made about South Africa needing to transform, the way we train our drivers. Because firstly, I maintain that one of our biggest challenges that we are facing, okay, we can talk about all these problems, but the problem emanates from the training. And we know, some of us know what is happening there at those training, at the license department. People buy licenses. Like, let's take the guy who is in the tax industries. I'm not being, what can I say? I'm not being, trying to discriminate. But a poor guy comes from a rural Natal and come to Johannesburg. He does not even have an idea of the road network in the country. The guy comes, he does not have a license. He just go to the industry and just is put on the road, and he's got the targets to make. So what do we expect? What do we expect? Okay, but my question now is to the gentleman from cross-border, because we've got the challenges with and you know that industry is clouded with the challenges of illegal immigrants, the guys that are employed there, who are not vetted properly to be on the road. But how is it gonna, how are we gonna apply R2 with those guys? Because the guy is illegal in the country, is employed, and how are you gonna enforce R2 when it comes to that? Because I mean, his license is not talking to our license system in the country. And Minister, again, I also want to speak to you about the collaboration with the SAPS. You know, we've got this spiking, where they put spikes on the road. And that's where I said the transport department need to work in collaboration with SAPS when it comes to challenges like that. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you very much. Lozi, would you like to hazard an answer? You said harmonization. How do you harmonize licenses from one country to the other? And what do you do with, freighting companies that hire people illegally?
Yeah, so it's different things. Lo, must speak. It's different things. So let's deal with the first one. So you heard the minister in her address talking about the SADC protocol on transport and meteorology. So what that protocol provides for is mutual recognition of our systems and and systems of the member states of the region. So if I'm carrying a driver's license from South Africa, it will be recognized in the countries across. If I'm calling a cross-border permit from South Africa, it will be recognized. The same with those driver's licenses that come from different member states. So that's what the SADC protocol provides for. So we're duty-bound as the South African government to recognize those documents and the licenses. The challenge becomes, I think Makosini touched on it, Collins touched on it as well, the ability for us to determine whether those licenses really are worth the salt and the ability and the different types of training standards. And it becomes difficult, right? So what we rely on, for instance, in the cross-border environment space is joint law enforcement operations with member states from across the border. So we would have various joint law enforcement, because the guys from across the border must assist us to determine first and foremost the veracity of those driver's licenses, as well as whether it is the correct documents. The question of the employment of foreign drivers, I think Transport has been on record to say the Department of Labor is leading that space in terms of the rules of the game. We cannot be seen to be driving that space. It's the space of the Department of Labor, and therefore we work with Labor to assist in terms of the determination of the employment conditions for the foreign drivers. The final part is the ARTO part. We are working on it together, but it's a difficult one, but it's for him.
Yeah, thanks, Envoy. But I think firstly, ARTO does not discriminate. Whether you're a foreign driver or you're a South African driver, you have to behave the same way and you get the same penalties as South Africans, because once you enter into our shores, you operate within our rules of engagement. And the rest of the other issues are the issues that he has addressed, the issues of cooperation, and indeed there are certain processes that are being followed between, some are being led by the SADC, and others are getting to the point of the entirety of Africa, so that we have the similar, or if not exactly the same, processes.
I think what I understood in the question, but I don't want to belabor it, is if you've got a demerit system that's working really well, and you pick up on a driver of truck X who has many infringements, that license alone should be able to tell you that this is a driver from DRC working for company X. You can then say to company X, what about the work permit, etc. So it should actually help as another measure of rooting out the problem of illegal immigration.
One wouldn't want to conclusively deal with the matter. However, there is a joint operation and integration of the systems between the Department of Transport, Home Affairs, as well as SADC. So that issue has been taken care of. There's no one who's going to evade justice in terms of the integration, save for us not to go to details how we're dealing with it currently.
Perfect. And final question. Still got a question? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Macintosh Polela. I'm from the Road Accident Fund. Collins touched on a very important issue when it comes to the demerit points, saying that when you're closer to 15, because of the behavior that we have in South Africa and unethical and corruption, it would be easy to just continue driving on because you can quite easily pay a police officer, a traffic officer. So at what point are we going to consider putting body cams on our traffic officers to the point where you come in the morning and you're not allowed to switch it off because it's a disciplinarable offense? Thank you.
All right, so body cams on traffic officers, but I think beyond just body cams, it's the use of technology to root out corruption on the roads, whether it's paying of fines or whatever.
Well, the innovation as well as e-law enforcement is very critical in our country. However, I think the mindset of the South Africans should be the fact that why should government spend so much to police ourselves when we can deal with the fundamental and the root cause of the issue, dealing with the human element and dealing with the conscience. However, the issue of the body cams has been introduced, but government is going to spend millions of millions in terms of the body cams. Which money could be invested in education? Which money can be invested in terms of the social amenities that are needed for our people? But we are not saying we should not do it, but let's think differently as being good citizens.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. I think that's all we can handle in the interest of time. Just before I introduce the Minister to close off the session, I'm just reminded on the issue of the body cams. I'm sure we all saw that video that went viral. They are good traffic officers, and this woman was stopped, or this woman stopped a driver, and he didn't like the fact that he'd been stopped. And so he said to her, why are you giving me a fine? I'm going to film you. And she said, well, I hope you're using an Apple iPhone because the picture would be really good. Minister Chikunga, as we close off the 6th administration with less than 15 days to go to elections, please can you come and give us your final clarion call on road safety?
Thank you very much, our program director. And thank you, Your Excellency, for coming to South Africa to engage us on this important subject. Not only have we learned from your experiences, but also the knowledge and the wisdom that you have on this subject, but also you've actually made us to rethink about what we are doing and how best can we improve as a country in order to save people's lives. I also want to thank everyone who is here, listening and thinking about the topic, and probably coming up with other means and ways and measures that we can use as a country. You are free to make contributions and to send any suggestion to us to say, think about this and do this as government. We do have challenges, but equally we do have solutions. The issue is, what then do we do with the challenges? I mean, the solutions that we have. When I spoke earlier, I actually tried to articulate the measures that we've put as government, be they policy or regulations or legislations, they're there. Whether it is education and awareness, I don't think that in South Africa there's anyone who uses the road who does not know that barrier line means not overtaking. I don't think there's anyone. But the question is, how many are overtaking cars right now as we sit at here over barrier line? And why is it happening? And I think it's the issue that we need to talk about. We've had quite a number of campaigns in South Africa that were for everyone. If you talk about ABC, you know you're talking about HIV and AIDS. You talk about even the COVID-19 or the climate change issues. But I'm not very sure whether we have had such a real campaign for road safety. Even if it is killing people every day as we speak, the majority of whom are breadwinners. And I think it's important that seated here together, we can then say, what is the campaign? What is it that we need to do together so that everybody in South Africa speaks about road safety? How do we take it to schools? How do we influence our basic education to have this as a subject so that as our children grow, they grow understanding exactly what this means? But how do we ensure that anyone who's crossing a red robot in town is found and dealt with, so that we know? I traveled, for instance, to Canada. In Canada, you don't cross the road anywhere. You go until you reach a robot. Even if there are no cars on the other side, you wait until the robot is green, then you cross. Even if you come from South Africa, you just have to learn, because that's what everybody is doing. So it's a culture, it's a way of living. Why in South Africa people will not wait for a green robot? Why? And it has become a culture to the extent that maybe the majority of us seated here have actually crossed a green robot, because everybody is doing it anyway, so why should I not do it? And I think it's something that we need to reverse and say, a red robot means that you have got to stop. It might be 2, it might be 3, it might be 4 people doing it. Maybe others will follow. And we then drum this, even as family members, to our children. What is good about this conversation is that it happens at the time when we're not expecting any increased traffic volumes. So it's not before any long weekend, it's not before any festive season, but it actually is a topic that is so critical, because by the end of today, at least 30 people shall have died on our roads. I'm talking about somebody who left in the morning and said to mother and father or children, I will see you in the afternoon. 30 of them. Is it something that we should not be concerned about? Is it things that we can say, no, it's fine, we'll see it in December? It cannot be. So I think we need to come together, to collaborate and work together and say, how do we reduce this so that people can live in South Africa? I really want to welcome the conviction of the truck driver, which is now on 20 counts of murder. I think it sends a message. Somebody said to me, I will not mention his name, he said, you know, the criminals in South Africa, those who want to murder people, do not know that if you want to kill a person in South Africa and don't be charged with murder, you may as well drive a car, kill them, it will be culpable homicide. That's the reality. But when courts are beginning to say, we look into your matter, and will actually found you guilty of murder, depending on the number of people that you have killed. For me, I think that is a step forward. And I think it is important that all of us in this room will welcome that judgment. I think we've got to talk about it, because it will send a message to our courts to say we are happy when people who kill people on the road are found guilty of murder than culpable homicide. I think that will be important. On issues of sparks on the roads, working together with the police, indeed it's true, we've got to collaborate. And I will fully agree with you, because when that happens, a person goes to the police station. You might find that we in the transport sector are not aware that a particular area has become a hotspot for such criminality. So they go to the police station, we don't get that information until something happens to the minister. Until it happens to the minister itself. And only then you get to know that, no, but that actually is a hotspot. Because you then go to the police station to report. And at the police station, they tell you that, as a matter of fact, you are the third person who's coming to report. Oh, so it means this is a hotspot. What we actually are doing, we are saying to Central, on our major routes, let's have smart roads. As much as possible, use technology, because it's possible. As a matter of fact, I have been briefed by quite a number of people after my incident that we can use technology, and that can help us. But in the meantime, whilst we do that, because remember again, it's yet another expenditure that we have not budgeted for. As we do that, we need to alert our people. I always say it, that if you think that the burst of your tire is unexplained, rather drive on the, what is this? On the rim than to stop, particularly at night. Rather, go and buy a new rim than to lose your life. There's nothing that is as painful as having somebody pointing a firearm on your head and you don't know them. And they give you instructions. You completely forget that I'm a minister. You think, oh, what happens to my family, my children? And you are the only woman. And they instruct you to come out of the car and sit on the grass. And you don't know what next is going to happen. You know, you take a decision immediately there that if they say I must undress, I won't, they may as well kill me. But you don't even know whether they're going to say that. Next thing the media says, there was 4 million rand. When you are busy dealing with the trauma, because it traumatizes you. Somebody says there was 4 million rand, there was 2 million rand, there was 150,000. There was 200 rand note. Nobody wants to believe that. Because seemingly, because you are the minister, you can't have a 200 rand note only. Then it must be something else. And these things, they continue to traumatize you as a person. Because now you must deal with issues that you become a victim by virtue of being a politician. You become a victim because somebody must now create a story that says, even if that was armed robbery, but there was corruption involved, and you don't have the platform to say, I had 200 rand note. They took a 200 rand note, they took my cell phone, they took my iPad, and they took 2 pairs of shoes. That's what they took. That's what they got from me. But then you've got to deal with this thing in the media that says, no, it could not have been. There must have been some money. Where did she get that money from? I didn't have. I have 200 rand note, and it was meant for me to ask the protector in an event I want to buy some drink, to buy me some drink, because I was not going to give them a card to use for me. But the media says there was 2 million rand. No one asked the question to say, but if there was 2 million rand, I'm just asking the question. Because those criminals have not been found. How do you know? Because they've not been found. How do you know? So I'm just saying the issue that you're raising, it's an important matter for us in the transport sector and the collaboration for us to know what is happening on our roads. Whether the police inform us or we inform the police that we've identified a hotspot. The criminals are now using our roads to commit crime, and this has happened. Believe you me, it will happen here in Gauteng, but you hear that the people are actually coming from the Eastern Cape. For instance, in my case, people from the Eastern Cape, and so on and so forth. So these are the issues that are there, that are happening. But I want again to thank you, South Africans. I thank you because whenever there are such discussions and when we invite you, you always respond. You really do. You come. If it is about road safety, everyone who is relevant will come. If it is aviation, I'm making an example, everyone, they will come. We thank you. Ours is then go back, talk to your employers, your employees about the road safety issue over the weekend before they close, to say, let's see you safe on Monday and be good on your road. Don't drink and drive over the weekend. It's a message that we might think it means nothing, but it can actually save our lives. It is an important message. I thank you very much.
We want to thank you, Minister, and also for humanizing the issue. That we can talk about road safety, but we're talking about lives, we're talking about families, we're talking about individuals, and we're talking about a real psychological trauma that people endure. And also by referring to your personal incident, you're reminding us of the multidisciplinary approach that's needed, because it was something that happened on the road, but it was a criminal action on the road. And in the end, what's needed is for you to see psychologists and healthcare people just to just ascertain that you're safe. So it's really an all hands on deck issue that needs all hands on deck to support us. And if you're not doing it for yourself, remember, save the lives of children. We want to thank you for joining us today. My understanding is there'll be lunch that's served in the foyer. But as we make our way out, please can we ask that the dignitaries leave the room first, and then I'll ask also Refula to tell us what happens next. All right. So if I could ask you to all be upstanding so that we allow our dignitaries to make their exit.